Hey folks, and welcome to Skeptic Voices, the brainstorm production that spends more time on getting to know the people in our community and less time on the issues. As skeptics, we spend more of our time learning, debating, and educating than we do on other pursuits, but we're all still people with families, jobs, home lives, and other things we value. I want to spend a little bit of time each month with one of my favorite members of the community and get to know them on a more personal level, instead of just debating ideas. I'll interview a different person each month and hopefully learn something about them that I didn't know before. This month's interview was with Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast and co-host of the By Skeptical podcast. I really appreciate their willingness to be my first guinea pig for this endeavor, and I think that this will be a good chance for people to get to know them. So here it is, my interview with Trav Mamone.
Put our dreams through the shredder, let's toast, 'cause things got better.
I guess to start off, what would you just, if you were starting a new friendship, what would be something you would tell somebody about yourself?
Well, I am a genderqueer, bisexual, atheist, and podcaster, and I have two shows, By Any Means, spelled B-I, that is a weekly show, and then every other week I do the By Skeptical podcast with Morgan Stringer. And By Any Means is like more of an interview-based show, where By Skeptical is more of like a news commentary show.
Oh, okay. What got you started in doing podcasting, say?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I actually started about 7 years ago. I was a progressive Christian at the time, and I had the idea to do an interview-based show where I talked to other progressive, sort of emergent Christians about, what they do and who they are. Like, I interviewed Brian McLaren and Rachel Held Evans and Nadia Bowles-Weber. Then, about a couple months later, a friend of mine that I've met through, Christian podcasting, Thomas from the Something Beautiful podcast, emailed me and asked me if I wanted to be a co-host on the show. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so I was with Something Beautiful, which was sort of an interview-based show where we talked to different guests. Some of them well-known, some of them just regular people, almost kind of like a progressive Christian version of Everyone's Agnostic, if you think of it that way.
Okay.
Right, yeah. And then around 2012, 2013, I kind of decided just hang up my headphones and just leave it because I was starting to get burned out. Cut to 2015. Yeah, 2015. I left Christianity and started blogging about atheism and social justice and secular humanism. And as a way to sort of, promote my blog, I would do like written interviews with different people that I liked. And one of them was Alex Gabriel, who doesn't do a lot of blogging nowadays. He does Godlessness in Theory, which I think used to be on Free Thought Blogs, but now is on The Orbit. Okay. But he wanted to do a Skype call, and I thought, well, instead of recording that and try to transcribe everything, why don't I just start a new podcast? So yeah, the By Any Means podcast was basically originally meant to be just a podcast supplement to the blog, but unfortunately fortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but fortunately, a podcast immediately got way more success and way more subscribers than the blog did. And so, I still blog from time to time, but that's how I started podcasting. So
you said you were leaving religion. So you were religious before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wasn't raised Christian. I was sort of raised as a what I like to call a wedding and funeral Christian. The only time my folks went to churches was someone either got married or buried. But I knew like the basic Bible stories. It wasn't until late high school, when I was 17, I became a Christian. I struggled a lot with depression, anxiety, and I was basically looking for literally anything to, cope with it, and so I discovered Christianity and became born again. And I was never really a good like fundamentalist Christian. I always had this
Right.
weird cognitive dissonance, like, okay, the Bible doesn't mention anything but dinosaurs, but there's definitely enough proof that dinosaurs existed. Well, maybe that part shouldn't be taken too literally, but things started to change around, I don't know, the late 2000s, around 2009, 2010. I was in a relationship with a woman whose family came from a very conservative Calvinist denomination.
Okay.
And yeah, we were together for about 6 years, but I was only happy for 3 of them. And so that was going on. Me trying to feel pressure to be like, the man that they wanted me to be.
Right.
And also I started getting more involved with the Emergent Church, which is sort of like a progressive Christian movement, and started reading a lot of books by Brian McLaren and Rob Bell, and I realized I started like questioning different things, like, okay, so the Garden of Eden story probably didn't really happen, that was just metaphor. Noah's Ark, that was just metaphor. Maybe even virgin birth, maybe that didn't really happen. So slowly I started chipping away at my faith. Finally got out of that horrible relationship around 2012, and by then I was pretty much a full-blown liberal Christian.
Oh, okay.
But even then, I started questioning things. As cliched as it sounds, Richard Dawkins was instrumental in my deconversion.
Yeah.
Although it wasn't the God Delusion that I read first. It was The Magic of Reality that I read first.
Nice.
Because I was getting really interested in science. Because I think at the time I was thinking about writing an ebook about how, God reveals himself in nature. And so I thought, let me just read some biology books that sort of where I can, I don't know, find little metaphors in nature about God. So I read Magic of Reality, and he was saying how, there's no magic and hocus pocus in the world. Everything beautiful can be explained through science. And so I sort of planted a little seed of doubt in my head.
Right.
And then I think I watched a debate. It was Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Francis Collins, and Ben Carson, and they were debating. Yep, it's true. It's just as
pretty. That's not really a fair fight, is it?
Right. Well, I mean, I didn't really expect Ben Carson to be intelligent, but
No.
I was actually expecting Francis Collins, who is a biologist who definitely accepts biology as a scientific fact, and
Right. Yeah.
says but doesn't believe in creationism, or at least young Earth creationism, but still a Christian. And so I thought that Collins's arguments were going to basically, he was going to like mop the floor with Dawkins, but
Right.
Dawkins kept saying, well, I look for evidence as a scientist, so where's the evidence? And I was like, evidence? Well, let me get back to you on that one. And so I just started studying more and more, and eventually got to the point where like I was deconstructing my faith so much that one day God just disappeared.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting, actually. I have Hitch was kind of instrumental in my stuff. I mean, all the Four Horsemen are now, it's a cliche, right? But but yeah, Hitch was mine, and it was lots of those debates. Like it always, I don't know. Now that doesn't seem to work as well with people.
Maybe, I don't know, and that's why I think I read some article about the whole street epistemology thing. They called it new atheism, but I don't know. I think that's just the press trying to latch on to trends and whatnot. Whether or not street epistemology will work in the forefront, I don't know. But speaking of Hitch I kind of got into a lot later, because when he was alive, I just thought he was a pompous asshole. But then when I deconverted, I started listening to a lot of his stuff, and he actually had a lot of brilliant things to say.
Yeah.
At the end of the Bi Skeptical podcast, I always play a clip of a debate he did with Dinesh. I can't pronounce his
Dinesh
name.
D'Souza?
Yeah,
Is that
him.
the guy?
Yeah, and Dinesh says at one point, in Christianity, you have the idea that morality is intentional. If you contemplate the sin, Christ says, in a sense, you've already committed it. And Hitch just jumped right in and said, thought crime, thought crime. You know what you're thinking, and we can punish you for it.
Right.
And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, because
Sure.
it seemed like when I was a Christian, even though I read all the nice Christian books like Brennan Manning and Henry Norwin, I think his name was pronounced. All these authors have talked about how we're all beloved children of God and that He loves us no matter what we do. But then I would read the Bible and Jesus would say things like, go and sin no more, and if you look after a woman to lust after her, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And there was another one I was just thinking about this morning, but by their fruits you shall know them. And so I kept thinking to myself, okay, so it's not really totally salvation through grace, is it?
Right.
It puts a lot of pressure on me to be perfect, doesn't it?
Yeah, you got to follow the rules just right. Or
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you mentioned being in a bad relationship. How did that get started? Where did you meet the person, and how did that go?
It was about 2005, I think. I was basically on a Christian dating site, and she expressed interest in me. And I would say at first I wasn't really physically attracted to her, but I don't know. I kind of do this weird thing in relationships where, or at least I used to, I'm not so much anymore, where I would be so lonely, so overwhelmed with loneliness that as soon as someone expressed any interest in me, I would sort of be like, okay, I guess this is what God has in mind.
Okay.
God has a weird sense of humor, but I don't really have any other options. And so we started dating, and about a year later, I proposed to her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we were planning on getting married within a year of the engagement, but we kept putting it off because of financial reasons, and also I was, basically unconsciously, I knew I really wasn't interested in getting married. It was more like, okay, I'm in my 20s, I'm, quote unquote a man, even though it took me years later to realize I'm actually not a man, I'm transgender. Right. And so this is basically what you do, right? You meet a girl, you settle down, have kids and all that stuff. But, and also we didn't really seem to really click. We had a couple of moments where we sort of clicked, but other times our personalities were just totally different. So
that does make things a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-wife and I, we used to joke that we're only together because opposites attract, because we literally had not a single thing in common interest. It's one of those things. So I guess something that I'm kind of curious about is how did you reach that point where you knew or could recognize that you don't identify as a man anymore?
Oh, interesting story. As cliched as it sounds, I always knew I was different. That, I always like to tell people that masculinity always felt like a pair of shoes that didn't fit quite right. Right. I like to use this metaphor. I used to have a pair of Adidas sneakers, and I don't know if it's all Adidas sneakers or this particular one, but the arches had very high arches, and I'm terribly flat-footed.
Okay.
So
they were super uncomfortable.
Right. They were, but I desperately tried to make it work because, hey, they look cool and this is the kind of shoes I'm supposed to wear. But then after all, I was like, no, it's not working. But I also being a woman, claiming womanhood never really fit either. And so I just thought, oh, I'm just an androgynous person. Until around 2012, 2013, I discovered the word genderqueer. And it was a YouTube video, and the person described it as being kind of both a boy and a girl at the same time. And I was like, oh, there's a word for that?
Okay, yeah.
Right. And so that started this process of sort of discovering my gender identity because I don't know. I'm the kind of person who, if something makes sense in that particular moment, I jump in head first without actually exploring it. It feels right. So this must be the truth. So I didn't want to like claim the label and like end up it being just a phase. So,
Right.
It took some time to really explore my gender presentation. Like I started painting my nails, shaved my beard off, started growing my hair long.
Right.
Started, let's see here, wearing jeans and t-shirts from the women's department at Target. Started going by they, them pronouns. Started wearing makeup. And the more I changed my presentation, the more it felt comfortable to me. So, yeah, I definitely, but it's still kind of weird being that I kind of lean towards femininity, but I don't feel like I have enough femininity to claim womanhood. Okay. And so it's kind of like, okay, so where do people like me fit within the general narrative, the general discourse,
Right. Because, yeah, no matter how much we're still fed that binary first, like our whole lives, right? Upbringing and whatnot. So it's probably, I don't know. I can't say that I understand what it's like, but it must seem weird just to not fit what other people expect, I guess.
Oh yes, definitely.
So yeah, so what is genderqueer? Like, I know I've heard a lot of people kind of define it in different ways, but I'm still not sure I really understand it. Okay,
sure. Well, it's sort of a catch-all term. Genderqueer and non-binary both sort of like catch-all terms for people who don't fit within the gender binary. There are other sort of sub-labels in the umbrella, like, there's bigender for people who feel like they are literally both a man and a woman at the same time. There's agender for who feel like, no gender identity really defines or really like sort of, defines who they are. There's gender fluid for people who feel like they kind of go back and forth between masculinity and femininity. Et cetera, et cetera. There's also Two-Spirit and Native American culture, although it's usually you're kind of discouraged from claiming that label unless you actually are indigenous. So.
Right? Yeah, I've heard a few people talk about that, but it's very rare that I hear anybody who's not indigenous already kind of taking that on as a label.
Right. And so the way I like to describe being genderqueer, or at least my experience being genderqueer, is this. If you mix red paint with yellow paint, you don't get, the result isn't, you won't call the result half red, half yellow, right? You call it a brand new color, orange, right? So that's basically how I feel about my own gender identity. It's a mixture of masculinity and femininity and mixed to the point where it creates something brand new.
Right. No, that's a really good metaphor, I think, because depending on how much red and how much yellow you got a different type of orange, and there's a spectrum of color there even between those. That's really cool. So I guess we kind of touched on you were raised as a boy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how was your childhood? Was it just a standard suburban upbringing or like with religious parents?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I should say that my dad bailed out on me and my mom when I was about 10 months old. Yeah, so I don't remember them ever being married. He would visit from time to time throughout my childhood, although his visits became, fewer and farther between as the older I got. He was, kind of living the sort of rock and roll lifestyle, even though he was never in a band or anything like, nor even musically inclined, but he definitely lived the rock star lifestyle. And so I guess probably he came to visit me only when it was convenient for him or something like that. So, after they split, my mom and I moved across the street to my maternal grandparents' house, where I basically lived for about a good 19 years until my mom remarried. Excuse me. Overall, it was okay. I did have a lot of emotional problems growing up. it was funny. Like when I was a kid, I would literally get upset at the drop of a dime.
Okay.
But because I didn't know how else to express these deep emotions that I felt. And then the older I got, I did the extreme opposite and basically internalized everything to the point where, like, you know, I would suddenly, totally break down, have like a nervous breakdown. I'm still trying to work on how to, deal with my emotions in a healthy way. I was bullied a lot in school. I think that probably is also stuff that I'm still working out on.
Right.
How
old are you?
You're actually not going to believe this, but despite my, face that never ages, I'm actually 34. I was born in 1983.
Oh, geez. Yeah. No, I wouldn't have thought that. I was sure you were in your maybe mid to late 20s, but no, that's 34 is actually still pretty young. Like I'm 40, so
okay. Gotcha.
But you can have a lot of life experience in 34 years.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. I think that's pretty much it as far as my childhood goes. It's a lot of ups, a lot of downs. That sort of thing.
So you were raised by your grandparents a little bit, or like in conjunction with your mother?
Yeah, basically.
That's cool. And you still get along with all of them now?
Well, both of my grandparents are dead.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's fine. Yeah, we always got along. Although I will say this, my grandmother did have a lot of mental issues, which she didn't really get checked for because she grew up in the time period where you just didn't talk about that stuff. Right. And so she would also get quite upset and quite angry a lot. Never lashed out at me, fortunately. In fact, but actually didn't find out until much later in life that she was actually abusive to my mom and her siblings.
Oh.
You're right. And so, I mean, I think eventually they sort of made up and stuff, but
that's tough though. Like that's hard to I don't know, make up or like be cool with somebody who abused you essentially. It's weird.
Right. Well, I don't really ask that much. She basically just wanted to keep me sheltered from all of that. Although, in fact, I didn't realize till also later on that we never really had any money growing up because my mom always chose part-time jobs so she could be home in time just to make sure that, grandma didn't do anything to me, which she never did. I think I kind of lost my shit more than lost my shit to them more than she did to me. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. My family. It's like the older I get, the more I discover the skeletons in my closet. Yeah. Maybe it's because my mom kind of realized she didn't want me to go through the same stuff she went through.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably not cool to like project or like put the weight of some of this stuff that you've dealt with on your kids, right? So yeah, like maybe someday, I mean, my upbringing was pretty good, but my kids will eventually learn about some of the stuff that happened in my life. Probably not yet.
Okay, cool.
But, yeah, so how are you doing now? You talk to your mom, you don't live with her?
Well, actually, I live in a studio apartment that my mom and stepdad have made out of their house. And wow. I'm kind of independent and kind of not at the same time. Yeah, I have my own, refrigerator and stove and sink and bathroom and all that stuff. So I'm mostly independent.
That's cool. So you were an adult when your mom married?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Around 19. I think they started dating right around my senior year of high school, and I think he also might have proposed to her during that time as well. And I get along with him great. Yeah, he's definitely a cool guy.
No, right on. I can appreciate the step family dynamic. It's sometimes weird, but sometimes it's really cool. Like I've got a pretty cool stepmom myself. So so what do you do now? You write a lot. Is that your job?
Pretty much, although I'm kind of looking for number one, more writing gigs, and number two, actually in the process of starting my own LGBTQ consulting firm.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. It's basically, the idea is that I would talk to different HR firms and medical officials and other organizations and businesses around my area to educate them about LGBT issues, because in 2017 we've come a long way since Stonewall, but there's still job discrimination. Let's see here, medical officials who don't really know how to deal with trans patients. There's that whole thing about the trans broken arm syndrome, where you go in for something simple as a broken arm, which should have absolutely nothing to do with your gender identity, but they're still kind of like hands off on this one.
Jeez.
Right. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, I think I'm a fairly good speaker. I mean, a lot of people say that I explain complex issues in a way that they understand. So why not, use this as a business? It's just, I literally just wrote the business plan yesterday, and so I'll be meeting with, So I'll be meeting with a couple of advisors to help me, get it off the ground.
That's cool, though. That sounds like a really valuable idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, do you make a living writing, or is that something that you have? Do you struggle with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it's, I don't know, it's freelance writing is a weird thing, because I did have a steady freelance writing job writing science articles for Paste magazine, but the number one, their payroll department is pretty much, I don't know, had some sort of nuclear meltdown, and so getting paid by them has been impossible. I've only been paid for half the articles I've written for them so far. And number two, I guess they're having more financial issues because the science section of Paste magazine recently folded. Oh no. And so basically you kind of have to pitch every single idea. You have to every single outlet you can find and hope that somebody picks it up. And I've had some luck. I'm starting to write more for ravishly.com. The problem is that there's a lot of times where, it's okay, I have to write something, but it's sort of oh, gee, I don't really know what I want to write about. Right. So that's a constant thing. It's there's some weeks where I have absolutely no ideas, and some weeks where I have a million ideas, and I don't really know who I should pitch them to.
Which do you pick, and where do you send them? And
right.
Did you go to university?
Yeah, I did. I actually went to college twice. The first time was right after I graduated high school. I went to a community college and actually majored in graphic design, although it wasn't until after I graduated and tried to start working in graphic design, sign making businesses, that I realized it really wasn't for me. Plus, I'm kind of crappy at. I'm actually pretty crappy at Photoshop. It's
is that right?
Yeah, my graphic design skills are basically badly photoshopped, cheap paperback book, self-published book level. Ever seen any of those? It's atrocious. That's pretty much my.
Is that right? So not something that you're passionate about because it wasn't your skill set wasn't up to par, eh?
Yeah, pretty much. But then about 5 years ago, or maybe more, maybe 7, I decided to go back to college because at the time I was working at a public library, and I thought, well, I've been here for a pretty long time, so I might as well just make this my career. But you needed a bachelor's degree in order to go from a circulation desk where you're basically just checking patrons' books out to them to, being at least a library associate where you can, work on the reference desk. And so I decided to go back and start taking online classes to get my bachelor's degree, which I finally got earlier this year.
Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So, definitely.
No, so what was what did you finally get your bachelor's in?
English.
Okay. No, that's it takes a lot of commitment. I myself managed to I guess you could say I flunked out of university in my second year. So I admire people who actually go through it. So what do you do when you're not being an activist?
Well, that's the problem. I think I kind of need more hobbies because I pretty much literally just sit in front of the computer all day, either trying to think of something to write, writing something, working on the podcasts, and that's pretty much it. I like to play video games on occasion. I'm not really like a huge gamer. I basically have like a Nintendo 3DS, and most of the games I like are like, either old school NES games or like, the Zelda series. I haven't played Wind Walker yet because I can't afford a a Switch. Maybe I'll get it for Christmas or something.
Right. Yeah. What system do you have?
A Nintendo 3DS.
Nice. Yeah, like I've got a PlayStation 2 and a PlayStation 3. I can't, spare them. My son really wants a new one, a PlayStation 4, but I can't justify spending $400 on a new machine.
Yeah.
But so you watch TV, you listen to music. What do you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My current favorite show is Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got basically what happened is so many of my friends kept making Rick and Morty references that by the time Pickle Rick came out and everybody was talking about it, I was like, okay, I gotta check out what this thing is about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just started season 3, the current season, and I'm basically Rick Sanchez in a way, I've become like this drunken, nihilistic, crabby pants, except that I'm not a mad scientist genius, but everything else I can totally relate to. I'm also a huge fan of Sense8.
Oh yeah. That's such a good show.
Oh yes. The first time I saw Nomi Marks, Jamie Clayton's character, I was immediately hooked. So I was like, oh, that's one of me. That's me up there. One of us up there representing. And let's see.
Yeah,
here.
and not in a caricature way, like
right, exactly.
A genuine way. Like all the characters actually are like, I love how fully fleshed out every individual character is on that show and the way they interact, and the whole thing is just amazing. Like,
yeah. It took a while though, I think, for them to fully flesh out all the characters. At least for I remember for the first couple of episodes, I was still trying to figure out who everybody was. But once everyone's storyline was developed and I think that was like the same time everybody realized they're all psychically connected to each other. So that's when it really picked up steam. As far as other stuff that I like to do, well, you mentioned music, and I am like a huge music nerd.
Right. Are you a music snob?
A little bit. I mean, I try not to shame people for liking music that I don't like. Like I hate Nickelback, but I've learned not to shame people who like Nickelback.
Right.
My taste is pretty, I guess, hipster-ish. Like, I like a lot of sort of independent bands. Like one of my favorite bands that unfortunately is no longer together. They were only together for like a couple years and then they broke up. Was a band called Gloss. It was a transgender punk rock band. They sound a lot like Black Flag if they were led by a trans woman.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They only released like 2 EPs though. Their demo EP and then this one,
their latest one they released last year called Trans Day of Revenge. But unfortunately, they broke up late last year because they were starting to get more mainstream press, and that was really, triggered a lot of, anxiety attacks for them, and so they decided to just disband. But at least we got about a good 7 minutes of music from them,
Right. Yeah, I notice on your Facebook you often post not often, but sometimes you'll post lyrics from Henry Rollins Band or Suicidal Tendencies, and just stuff that came out when I was in junior high, and I'm just fucking A. It's nice to see other people that like that stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I tend to express a lot of my emotions through memes, and so when I feel my mental health issues are really bad and I feel like I'm losing my mind, for some reason I've used Suicidal Tendencies song Institutionalized as my sort of outlet for expressing to the world that I'm having a really tough time and I feel like I'm losing my mind. So note to anyone listening, if you see me say all I wanted was a Pepsi on my Facebook wall, it's not because I'm thirsty.
No, that's right. That's such a good song. You and Chris and Jeremiah sort of started a podcast about music, didn't you?
Yeah. It was called The Spinoff. We only did 2 episodes. I'm not really quite sure if I want to continue it or not, because I don't know, for some strange reason, reviewing music is a weird thing for me because I don't really know how to describe it in words to the audience. I used to write music reviews for a local publication, and that's since folded, but I found out that it was really hard for me to really sort of describe the music in a way, because basically what I was doing, I was trying to translate how it sounded with words, and it's nearly impossible to do that, mostly because I don't know a lot of I'm not a musician myself, and so I don't know a lot of musical terms. It took me a long time to realize that syncopate did not mean what I think it meant. So
right. What does it mean?
Oh, you know what? I'm still not sure. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4,
okay,
or something like that, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong.
I've never been
the drummers in the audience figure that out.
Yeah, I've never been big on the details of I don't know about making music. I know how music affects me, and I know what I like to hear. So it's
yes, I can't say it's because the musician uses these chords or this particular key that it has a lot of it has such an emotional impact on you. It's yeah, I don't know that. All I know is I like what I like.
Right. Yeah. Do you listen to the Geologic podcast at all?
No, I don't.
He's a musician. George Trav is a great musician, and he sometimes will get questions and he'll break down the exact technique of the music. And it's so over my head. It's fascinating to listen to, but I have no idea what he's talking about.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, it's pretty neat anyway. Yeah. So I guess, what do you kind of think you'll be doing in the future? Assuming the world lasts 5 years, what do you see for yourself?
Well, hopefully, I'll be, continue what I'm doing right now, trying to, start conversations about LGBT rights and secular humanism and social justice,
That's awesome. It's nice to have people doing that. It seems to get a lot of pushback. So I think that's an indication that you must be doing something right. Maybe.
Yeah, I guess so too. Well, I guess it depends. I heard I'm only making $30 an episode on Patreon. So in terms of financial success, I'm not really doing so well. Right. But as far as the hardcore fans who love what I'm doing, and if I explain it in a way that they understand, they share it all over Facebook. It's okay, so guess I got that going for me. Yep, maybe I should start shitting on transgender people, and then I'll get make a bunch of money on Patreon.
Just play up the white victim role.
Yeah.
They love that stuff. That's where the money is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess, anything you want to talk about?
Well, actually, that's about it. I think we had a pretty good conversation, you know?
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool. This is probably where I'd say, oh, I gotta go pick up the kids if we were having coffee.
Right.
Yeah. No, it was a good talk. I really appreciate you being the first guinea pig for this kind of project. Like I said at the start, like we really spend so much time talking about issues that I don't know if I know that much about the people that I consider friends, right? So
right, yeah.
It's kind of different. So I figured I'd try this and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it went well.
No, right on. Well, thanks a lot, Trav. I'll see how the editing process goes, but this should be out pretty quick. Like, okay, cool. I plan on putting one of these out every month if I'm happy with them. So,
right.
Well, have yourself a great day, and thanks for joining me. Sorry it was so late.
No, that's fine.
Awesome. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
And everything could change like that, and all these years go by so fast.
All right, so that's all. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Skeptic Voices, the podcast about getting to know the people in our community. You can find more from Trav at freethoughtblogs.com/byanymeans, or go to Spreaker.com and just enter By Any Means or the By Skeptical podcast into the search bar. If you want to hear more Skeptic Voices, you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or your favorite podcast player. Or you can just stay subscribed to Brainstorm, because this will now be out on that feed regularly. I'm also going to start uploading the Hardcore Skeptic series to this feed, the Brainstorm feed, starting with the first episode, and then putting one out every 2 weeks. This is going to require more storage space on Libsyn, so if you want to help me out with that, you can by becoming a patron at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. I'd love it if you could go and rate all my various podcasts and give me a review on iTunes or Facebook or anywhere else that you rate things, and share the hell out of all the shows. I always feel like we're not reaching enough people and we need to share more to help spread the word. If you let me know where you shared the show, then I will give you a shout out in the next episode of Brainstorm. Check out the show notes at thebrainstormpodcast.com or on Spreaker under Brainstorm Podcast or Skeptic Voices for this particular project. I think that's everything. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters, but so do people.
Here's to us.